microphone too. I don't know how long I can hold on to this microphone. Okay, so we're on the Great Wall, so let's make a great painting, all right? We're going to make a frame over here, and I want you to fill the inside of this painting with a playground from your imagination, okay? Or any playground that you had when you were a child. And then people it with kids. It doesn't have to be your own kids, but if it's not your own kids, that's kind of creepy. But go ahead and people it with kids. And they're doing whatever you think kids do. And among what all those kids are doing, one of those kids is acting like a leader. And hold that picture in your mind. The kid that you think is a leader, flash freeze that, and then come over here because it's story time. When I was 10 years old, I was about 10 feet, not 10 feet, I'm sorry. I was 10 years old and I was about 2 feet shorter than I am now, but I weighed the same. And my favorite thing to do was to go with my mother to the Salvation Army where we would buy trophies. For some reason, Americans have this thing where they look at their giant trophy collection and they say, surely someone less fortunate than I would do better with all these trophies that I have with my name on them. And they donate them to the Salvation Army. And then we, and my mother and I, we go buy them. We bought diving trophies, we bought golfing trophies, we bought swimming trophies, we bought ballet trophies, 2 feet taller, same weight, you know. And we put them all up on top of this really tall china cabinet in our living room so that nobody could see the names. And they could only see the little guys on top doing that. And I took credit for them. Success. And then one night, I remember we were burglarized. The trophies were fine, don't worry. But we were burglarized, and suddenly there were 2 police officers in the living room. 2 very tall, perceptive police officers with flashlights, kind of like this. You know, like police officers like to hold their flashlights like this, because it's next to their eyes. And there was one of them, I was so nervous. I was a little round ball of gelatin in a nightgown, and I was watching him, and he was standing there in front of the china cabinet looking at all of my trophies like this. And then looking back at me. And I was devastated. But later on in my life, as I grew up, I started to earn my own badges and ribbons and trophies and things like that. And actually, come to think of it, I've been thinking about it for a while, but my entire childhood and my entire young adulthood was saturated with competition. So much so, and at such an early age, that it was to the point where in my little brain, I was conflating these ideas. Like on this hand, I was conflating competition and winning with success and leadership. And they got all mashed up together because that's what brains are, they're mishy-mashy. And that kind of conflation of those ideas is shaped the way that I think about what a leader is and what a leader does. And I think that thread runs really deep in American society and to an extent, of course, in China. Now, I am an educator, and I'm not the kind of educator to argue against any type of competition. However, I think that sometimes, many times, we use measurements of competitive ability to stand in for measurements of other qualities of people that are really hard to measure. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Good, I'm moving on. And that kind of habit, it shapes the way that we perceive, the way that we find and identify and teach future leaders, right? That's what happens in the society. So, story time again. When I was 13 years old, I got second place in a speech competition where the topic was chickens. Now, just to make sure that you're clear on this, that means that I gave a speech that was not as good as one other person's speech about chickens in that group. And I dragged that red ribbon home because in America, red is loser, blue is winner, and I knew exactly what my mother would say. And when I got there, she said, well, who got first place? We're from Georgia. And I said, Wanda. Wanda, of course, Wanda, the penultimate overachiever. She was always in front of me. She was always number one. She always got first place. And I'm going to stop talking about her right now because she's probably speaking right after me today. And my mother noticed that I was upset about this. And she tried to comfort me. So she said, well, Barrie, it's all right. Some people, I guess, are just born to lead. And I guess that some people were not born to console. So why is it I have this connection connection in my head. I have these two little sticky ideas of the marriage between competition and leadership. Why does this stick together so well in my head? And I think I have a very simple answer for that. My brain is lazy. Competition is really, really easy to measure. Competitive ability is very easy to measure. Leadership skills are not. So which one are we going to choose? When you have a leadership retreat or you're trying to teach children how to be leaders, Harrow International, I'm looking at you. When you try to measure outcomes for leadership are hazy and they're cumulative. And nobody's got time for that. But trophies, ribbons, and standardized tests draw a line in the sand where we can put the winners on this side and the losers on this side. We can put the leaders right here and the followers over here. And that overvaluation of competition in American society, and Chinese society too, it primes our brains to only notice and support the development of one particular type of leader. And so, excuse me just a moment here, it also, what it does is it will narrow our chances of finding a really good leader if we're looking for one, because we're only looking for one type. Now, let's draw on the stage a continuum. I'm glad this has a really long cable here. Let's go over here. All right. On this side of the continuum, we're going to stack the United States of America. We're also going to put China and any other country that you can think of that's really just absolutely just thinks that standardized testing and objective measurements of success are the bee's knees, okay? Any other country. Now we're going to go to an opposite country over here. And I have some more mic. All right, we're going to say that this is the other side of the continuum, okay? And over here we're going to put Norway. Norway, the Norwegian early childhood education system is completely project-based and is very, very, very collective. And what happens is the kids get together in age-different groups. They're like from age 3 to 7 in kindergartens, and they are thrown a project or a problem to solve, and then a mentor or a teacher will kind of help sort of massage them towards different kinds of outcomes, because what they do is they develop their abilities within the same kind of problem-solving situation, and they reach different goals. And sometimes they reach the same goal, but they get there in different ways. In this kind of system, this educational system, there's about zero competition. So what are we going to do when we're talking about how to teach leadership and how to identify leadership? Maybe we can rein it in a little bit from the United States side of things and pull it over here. Or maybe we can kind of say, Norway, you need to kick it up some more and bring it into the middle, and we can put both of these approaches together and make sort of a leadership sandwich, and we can have an uber leader right here in the middle, right? I think that thinking about the problem of how to teach leaders and how to identify them by looking at it in these terms of competition and testing and who's coming out on top is sort of indicative of a traditional way of thinking about leaders. And I want to kind of step through the continuum right now and tell you about a quote that Anthony supplied me with a little while ago. He was talking to me about visiting the Maasai tribe, and he had spoken to a Maasai tribesman and asked this tribeman, how do you choose your leaders? And the tribesman said to him, depends on the problem you have to solve. We have many leaders. It seemed really obvious to him. And that quote just seems to exemplify exactly the approach that we need to be taking when we try to teach and identify leadership. Let's go back to this painting. We still have the painting up here, right? You have the picture of the playground over here? It's here, yeah? Thank you. You're trying to point it out for me. The painting is still here, and go back to your picture of that kid that you thought was a leader. Chances are, I'm going to guess, that kid's doing something that makes them stand out from the crowd. Probably doing something like, I don't know, maybe it's a little girl standing at the bow of a ship, and she's pointing towards an island, and she's saying, land ho! And then there's a bunch of other little kids in the back with oars, right? Or maybe there's a kid who's managed to clamber his way up to the top of a human 5-year-old pyramid. Yeah? If you haven't thought of kids doing that kind of thing, see me after the talk, because you're really interesting. Now, I propose that the reason why you jump and immediately choose those kinds of children who are involved in those kinds of activities as the leaders is because we've primed our brains to look at the person in front and say, that's the leader. And we've done this because of our overvaluation of competition. I think that if we go about teaching leadership in a way that includes a lot more children, and we throw out these ideas of, well, I think this child has leadership potential, then we would not be only catering to the Wandas of the world, because the Wandas of the world, is she here? The Wandas of the world would be leaders whether we liked it or not. What we need to do is pull up the kids who don't know they're leaders yet. And we need to pull up the kids who are collaborative leaders, the kids who are shy, introverted leaders, the kids who are quiet problem solvers, the kids who are the glue that holds a team together, and that's how they lead, and the kids who lead by being the gas that makes a group go. I believe that a collaborative-based, problem-centric approach to teaching and supporting leadership would help develop kids across the spectrum. And it would help us to help the children who would like to fade into the foreground from time to time and then fade into the background when they're not needed or they're not inspired, without having the pressure of having to be a leader or a follower, to have that label stuck on them. Competition needs to take a back seat, while coordination and cooperation need to be moved to the forefront. I was to close, I was actually watching a video on YouTube about a Norwegian kindergarten. This is a typical day in a Norwegian kindergarten. This just wasn't a field trip. They actually do this kind of stuff all the time. They were going to climb a mountain. The weather was hideous. It wasn't a very big mountain, but if you're 3, it was a huge mountain. And they started climbing the mountain, and some of the kids didn't like it very much. About a third of the way up the mountain, we started losing people. Kids started crying. There were kids who just didn't like being outside, which is a pity because your whole kindergarten's outside. And there were kids who weren't just taking the whole physical activity thing very well. And then there were kids who just excelled at this task. At every turn, these children were supported by teachers, mentors, or even other children. Because that's what happens in a mixed age class. You get the older children to mentor the younger children. Eventually, the outcome was they all reached the top of the so-called mountain and they sat down and they ate some lutefisk or whatever. And everybody got a ribbon. But it wasn't a competitive ribbon. It was a ribbon that makes you feel good for being part of something and for achieving the goal the way that you needed to, not the way that somebody else told you to. We have many leaders. It depends on the problem to be solved. We've wasted a lot of time in identifying our leaders as the people who are standing in front of everybody else. I think that a cooperative approach to teaching leadership would allow for the blossoming and the development of not only individual leaders, but collective leaders, cooperative leaders, and leaders who lead in ways that we don't even know about yet. Because very soon, we're going to need a lot of people who can work with other people more than anything else. Because there is no I in leadership in Norwegian. Thank you.